Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. A week has passed since most of us first gathered here. There's been a few departures of one or two cooks had to go off to their other lives, and occasional sporadic visitors from the other side of the world of Amaravati. Additions and subtractions, but most of us have been here for a week, and as I've pointed out a couple of times, time is a very subjective matter. And you might think, a week? It can't be. It can seem so long or so short, or simultaneously. The eternity that goes by in a flash, simultaneously both taking forever and gone by so quickly. But at least technically speaking, today is Friday, as far as I'm aware, and so it's quite possible that passed through a number of people's minds. Only a couple of days left to go. Sunday, you have to go back to that other world, and so the mind easily starts to conjure up thoughts of different possibilities. What we're going to do, how can we carry on our practice? In a retreat situation like this, we can find such a depth of wholesome, helpful qualities, such supportiveness and such riches. Really, spiritual blessings can be very thick on the ground, thick in the air, and even despite them taking a lot of work and being not easy by any means, we can really deeply appreciate what goodness comes forth from a retreat situation. So it's very natural for us to, at this sort of point in the flow of things, to be thinking, how can I carry this on? And so then the mind starts to wonder. What are the ways that can be brought about? That is, the qualities of the retreat, or things that are learned, or the aspects of the retreat that are supportive. How can these be sustained, carried through outside of this, very precisely crafted and beautifully maintained environment that our wonderful managers and cooks and everybody helping us sort of create this beautiful space for us to be in for this time. So it's very tempting to start coming up with a list of handy hints for human life. How to handle humanity, your own and other people's. And this is very reasonable. And I was contemplating this evening, and but what came to mind was a letter that Luang Por Chah sent just before to Ajahn Sumedho, just before his health finally collapsed in 1981. This was before Amaravati, and when Chithurst Monastery was pretty much the only place. I think maybe Devon and Harnham were just sort of on the verge of beginning. But I remember quite distinctly one day in the summer of 1981, and Ajahn Sumedho got a letter. It was actually written by one of the Western monks living out at this branch monastery, Tamsang Pet, where Luang Por was spending the Rains Retreat that year. And he began the letter by saying, "You're not going to believe this, but Luang Por asked me to take his dictation because he decided he wanted to write you a letter." So Ajahn Chah was literate. He could read and write, but he virtually never ever did. This is an extraordinary event that Luang Por would actually write somebody a letter, and so and it's in all likelihood. He realized that his health was decaying rapidly, and so one can guess quite reasonably that he realized this was going to be the last communication that he was going to be able to make with Ajahn Sumedho, his senior Western disciple, and leading the development of the community in the West, outside of Thailand. So you might think, well, here is the great master's final instructions to his chief disciple in the West. And you think, wow, it's going to be a long list. We'll always do this. I want you to do this, this, and this. And if you're going to develop the monastery in this way, then I want you to make sure you always do this, 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 and never do that. If you're thinking about doing this, well, I do it this way. And how many of our minds would work like that? If you're sending off your instructions to someone, your kind of your agent, your overseas agent, not very experienced, and in a completely strange environment, you feel sort of protective and supportive. You'd want to sort of provide cover every angle of all the right things to do and everything that might go wrong, and the ways you feel it'd be good to structure things and develop things, and what dangers there might be, and so on and so forth. And I realize I'm projecting a lot into second-guessing Ajahn Chah is a very dangerous business. But anyway, I'll do it. But the letter, in fact, was extremely brief, and I remember it very distinctly. So it began with the other monk's sort of little preamble saying, "You're not going to believe this, but Luang Por asked me to take his dictation because he decided he wanted to send you a letter, and this is what he wants to say to you." And so the text that Ajahn Chah dictated was, "Whenever you have feelings of love or hate for anything whatsoever, these will be your aids and partners in building paramita, in building the spiritual perfections. The Buddha Dhamma is not to be found in moving forwards, nor in moving backwards, nor in standing still. This, Sumedho, is your place of non-abiding." Full stop. Lots of love, Luang Por. No. That was it. The final instructions. Okay, this is. I want you, to imagine that if that's the last thing that he could say, or he was going to pass on, that was a very potent communication. So. And if you contemplate it, if we sort of pick that up and think it through, and rather than trying to think through every single detail of all the things that should be done right and all the things that mustn't be done wrong, and taking care of every nuance of the material and social psychological world, instead he just went right to the very root of the practice and of the way to be in accord with all things. And it was extraordinarily good advice. Whenever you have feelings of love or hate for anything whatsoever, these will be your aids and partners in building paramita. So it's not like starting out from never experience love or hate. But when they arise, know what to do with them. That movement, that abrasion, that friction, the movement towards the movement away from, or grabbing hold of, or contending against. That's the clue, that if there's friction there, then that friction is the very quality that enables us to sharpen our wisdom sword. And some years earlier, when Ajahn Sumedho had gone back to visit Ajahn Chah, actually it was actually months earlier, I think it was the beginning of 81, he took a large group of lay people back to visit Thailand, and it's a famously painful Dhamma tour. He was persuaded to take a group of about 22 people. Maybe some here were actually on that trip. And anyway, I won't go into the details of it, but when he first went to go and pay his respects to Ajahn Chah, he said, "So, how's it going, Sumedho?" And he said, "Oh, it's amazing. It's really incredible. At Chithurst's house, it's turned out really well there, and it's an extraordinary group of people. And the monks are amazingly committed and kind of cooperative with each other. They really get on well. Everyone's very strict with the Vinaya, personally very committed and keen on the meditation, and the nuns are all very kind of inspiring, committed people, and I've never been with such a kind of an uplifting and harmonious group of people my whole monastic life. It's really wonderful. It's great, kind of waxing lyrically at length about how great and marvelous and harmonious it all was. And then I suspect he could feel a certain kind of quietude emanating from the master at that point. And so he finished his sort of eulogy of how wonderful everything was at Chithurst, and Ajahn Chah's comment was, "Well, you won't develop very much wisdom living with that bunch." Completely unimpressed. I don't know if he promised to send a few of his prize friction creators, but they showed up anyway. Yes. So, in terms of what are the useful ways of practice, what can we take with us, or what are the sort of handy hints that we might sort of carry with us to sustain the practice environment outside of noble silence and people cooking for you and and all of that. Having 50 people around you, diligently practicing and at least looking serene, if not actually looking very serene on the outside. Whether they are on the inside or not is beside the point. At least we got these reminders all around us. And so, in a way, what came to mind is actually the most helpful kind of thing. Is rather than just sort of making our list of have morning and evening meditation every day and always do this, that, and the other, just establishing those basic principles of whenever you have feelings of love or hate for anything whatsoever, these will be your aids and partners in building paramita of the 10 paramitas, which of course I'm sure many of you are familiar with: generosity, virtue, renunciation, energy, wisdom, patience, honesty, resolution, loving kindness, equanimity. Those are the 10 perfections, 10 paramitas. So, if we have in mind, okay, if I meet with something that I love or I hate, remember, these are my friends, these are my aids, my partners. And then in particular, the second part, the Buddha Dhamma is not to be found in moving forwards, nor in moving backwards, nor in standing still. This, Sumedho, is your place of non-abiding. Now you might feel that's a little bit abstruse, and you'd like kind of more explicit instructions. But what do I do with, when the dog's sick? What do I do? My husband has got this kind of bad habit, annoys me. What do I do? Oh, there's these. Should I try and get advancement? Should I, at the university, should I keep publishing papers, or should I just bail out the whole thing? But we're always trying to judge what is good and what is bad, what's right and what's wrong, in terms of kind of very explicit worldly values, perceptions, thoughts. We judge things in those ways. But what Ajahn Chah was pointing to, and what these same kind of teachings that that you find in the suttas are pointing to, is that that if the heart is to be attuned to Dhamma in a genuine and direct, immediate way, then that involves the quality of non-abiding, of not taking a position anywhere or with anything. It's not becoming a person who is heading towards something, heading away from something, or being any place. It's that as soon as the mind, as soon as we take hold or become someone who's at the university, or we become a husband or a wife or a parent or a child or any of that, then in a way that's dukkha right there. The insight that Ajahn Mahabua described as being when he had his major enlightenment experience, he was in his account of it, he describes he was doing walking meditation at this particular monastery. So shortly, sometime after Ajahn Mun had passed away, his teacher, and as he was doing walking meditation, this insight arose, and he said it was almost like hearing it rather than thinking it, or it came to him. And the way it's translated into English was, if there is a point or a center to the knowing, then that is the essence of entry into a level of being. That is the essence of birth. As soon as there is a center, a point for the knowing, then that is like the seed, the cause of birth. We become a person, we become an experiencer, we become a woman, a man, old, young, clever, stupid, success, failure, happy, unhappy, good, bad, the whole number of different things. So that many of these teachings and practices that we've been talking about during this week, it's about learning how not to take birth, how not to be born into the five khandhas, therefore not to be formulating that experience as a me or as a mine, as an independent, separate entity. So the teachings that I was talking about earlier on this week on still flowing water, that the mind is like still flowing water. This is where there is stillness, the quality of knowing or awareness is perfectly still, or is not related to the three-dimensional world and the world of forwards, backwards, or standing still, or movement. And then there is the flowing, there's the perceptions, the ideas and feelings that take shape and do their thing. So that as soon as we are faced with this kind of conundrum, of not moving forwards, not moving backwards, and not standing still, then to the mind that's identified with the body and with the three-dimensional world and with the personality, it's completely frustrated, isn't it? What's he talking about? How can that be? And this was Ajahn Chah liked to have put these. He like many Dhamma teachers, he would have a phase of particular phrases he would use all the time, or particular questions he would put to people. So for some years, whenever he encountered people, or people came to see him, he would ask this kind of question: if you can't go forward, you can't go back, and you can't stand still, where do you go? I said, well, to the side. Can't go. Okay, you can't go sideways either. Well, up. No balloons. And in his own way, he will sort of keep prodding and poking you until you the thinking mind is searching for some kind of solution, go kind of diagonally. If you can't go forward, you can't go back, you can't stand still. Where can you go? And so that what he would do, and in the point of it would be that you can't find a solution if you conceive yourself to be this independent, separate person existing in time and in the material world. If that's what we are, if I am this individual person, this separate being existing in three-dimensional space and time, then there's no answer. But it points us to that realization of that dimension of our being, which is not a person, which is not related to time, which is not related to location, to space. Now, this might seem all kind of extremely abstruse or sort of airy-fairy, but Luang Por Chah was an extremely compassionate teacher, similarly the Buddha, and they would not put these teachings forth unless they were of essential importance. Or like with Ajahn Mahabhu's insight also, because it's like, as long as we're locked into the idea, well, of course I'm a person. Here I am. It's Amaravati treatment at Shrine Room, and it's Friday evening. Ajahn Amaro said it's Friday. It's time. Time passes. We started a week ago, and now a week has gone by, and here we are. Well, as I've been also saying numerous times over, these are relative truths, that they have a kind of some bearing on our experience, but it's not the whole truth. It's just like, as far as the sun is concerned, is it Friday? It's Friday in terms of a human convention about the spinning of this planet. And if you say, well, okay, you could call it Friday, but these are just agreements that we come to. And so that these are ways of reflecting on our experience to see that when there's a letting go, when there's no identification with the five khandhas of the body, feelings, perceptions, mental formations, consciousness, then there's the experience of non-abiding. There's no being that's being born any place. But still, it doesn't it doesn't suddenly evaporate. I haven't sort of noticed suddenly. There's a few empty cushions here, but I've never actually spotted anyone just sort of dissolving on the spot. Oh, look, Eduardo just had an insight. He realized anatta, and his zafu is now empty. But we still the five khandhas still carry on. Sucitapala hasn't dematerialized once this whole week. She's sustained herself. Her appearance has managed to hold itself in being the whole time. So it's not that there's the insight and then all of the material things disappear, but it's the clinging stops, and there's the realization of Dhamma. And another way of one of the teachings that comes in the suttas that Ajahn Chah was deriving this from is a famous passage in the Udana, where the Buddha says there is that realm where there is no birth, no aging, no sickness, no death, no sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, or despair. In that realm there is no darkness, no light, no sun, no moon, no stars. There is no coming into being, no fading away, no arriving, no abiding, and no disappearing. This is a paraphrase of that. And then at the end he says this whole list of qualities of this of the unconditioned. He says, this indeed is the end of suffering. No coming, no going, no standing still. This indeed is the end of suffering. So to the mind that's habitually identified with the five khandhas, it's like, but. Well, where is that? Well, where is the wrong question. Where is dependent on three-dimensional space, right? Where doesn't apply. Similarly, who, as we've been investigating the question here, who am I? After a while, when you start to investigate the question who, it can start to seem like, well, kind of who is not really it, is it? It's not really a who, it's more like a what. And then you start to investigate what. And say, well, what isn't really it either. And slowly the layers fall away. And as the investigation and the exploration is continued, then as more and more we find the heart able to rest in that quality of knowing that's not associated with and not clinging, not fixed onto a form or a place or a time. But yet, from that basis of knowing, then all of the action and the kind of responsivity, you still sort of show up for your chore on time. I mean, it's not like you know, Rosie comes around and says, "You're supposed to be emptying the dustbins." Excuse me, I'm just realizing the uncreated. I haven't been born. I'm not coming, not going, not standing still. Yeah, but you're supposed to be doing the bins. You know? So you can be sure that if it's your job to do the bins and you're not doing them, the realization is not complete. Yes, there is neither coming nor going nor standing still, and yes, the bins still need to be attended to. So the more fully and completely we're able to establish this kind of insight, then the more that really serves us. It wasn't as when Ajahn Chah sent this advice to Ajahn Sumedho, it was just like, I'm going to set the bar so high, Sumedho, that just so I can have a good laugh at you. But he was genuinely giving his disciple the best possible advice, and so that I'm passing this on as encouragement for all of us here, not just to sort of come up with some sort of highfalutin, impossibly demanding teaching that you think, oh dear, this is completely out of my league. But actually, just to let this into the heart and to contemplate this as the most helpful and usable, adaptable form of advice, because it's genuinely when there is that letting go and that realization of the unconditioned, of true emptiness, of selflessness, then all of the details of what to do with the dog, whether to keep writing papers, all of those issues, what to do, when, where, and how, they answer themselves moment by moment when the heart is attuned to the Dhamma, when there is no abiding. As soon as I'm trying to be a person doing the right thing, it's all slightly askew, right? I think we've all experienced that. Me trying to do the right thing never quite fits, like I was saying last night about relationships. When I'm trying to get it right, you can't do it. It's just like when you let go and our intuitive wisdom, the attunement of the heart to the moment takes over, then we find that we can do the right thing without thinking about it. And as soon as we think, hey, I'm really getting this, it's like we fall off the tightrope as soon as we're applauding ourselves, or even doubting, am I doing this right? Oh, off we drop. So that as we establish this, use a retreat situation to really establish this kind of insight, or at least have inklings of it, even if it's just for like half a second during the whole of the 10 days we're together, that's really enough. Like when people asked Ajahn Chah why he only stayed with Ajahn Mun for 3 days, he said, well, once if the light comes on, you can see where you are. You don't have to kind of hang on to the light switch. That probably wasn't exactly the words that he used, but it was along those lines that once the lights come on, why do you have to stay near to the cause of the illumination. That was enough. You can orient. The light comes on. You can orient yourself, even if the light goes off. Well, the door's over there, and there's that cushion there, and there's a stool there. So okay, head that way. So similarly, even if we feel like we just maybe had an inkling of that intuition of non-abiding, of real abandonment and selflessness, that's enough, because in a way the heart recognizes it. The Dhamma, the heart knows its own nature. It recognizes its own nature. It knows the Dhamma, and so that in a way, once that's even been seen, even very, very briefly, it's really just a matter of recollecting that and trusting that, and to be ready to be guided by that. So many of the other practices that we can use, or ways that we can sustain the environment of a retreat, or the depth of practice or insight from a retreat, is simply ways and means that we can recollect or revivify that insight. We can recontact that insight, or the implications of that insight. We're allowing that to spread through our world. This is why I also find the meditation on the nada sound particularly helpful, because it's listening to the inner sound, and it can remind us of that quality of presence, the presence of the Dhamma, the presence of that context for all our experience. It can remind us of the fundamental emptiness of phenomena, of all of the five khandhas. It's not like we sort of just hear the sound and then this whole sort of, oh yes, this is reminding me of. But as we develop that, then just listening to the sound, then when we tune into it, there's something in us that recognizes, oh yes, right, this is all happening in my mind. This looks like me dealing with the traffic, but actually this is all sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, arising, ceasing. Aha, relax, loosen the grip. And so that as we go about our lives, once we've come Sunday afternoon, and when we go on to our different worlds, then that simple kind of recollection of like listening, turning to the nada sound. That, oh yeah, it's still here. Even in the traffic, it's here. Even in the temple, it's here. Back in my living room, with the kids and the dog and everybody. Yeah, even with the dog licking your ear, in the other ear you can still hear it. Still there. Oh yes, even the dog licking my ear. This is still the five khandhas arising and ceasing. That's what it is. Yeah. That's all it is. It's events happening here and now. Patterns of consciousness taking shape, moving and changing. And as we use the retreat situation that we have, and these days before us still have a couple of days, we can be making efforts to cultivate these kind of realizations, and also just the whole sense of that is part of that the practice of non-abiding is also one of the ways that the Buddha would teach is seeing that when there's a realization of selflessness, then things don't have a place to land. We're not. We often feel burdened by life because we feel we've got to carry the whole thing around. In John Cage's book, John Cage, the experimental musician, he once wrote a book, predictably called Silence. His most famous piece of music was actually based on the nada sound. A little known fact. John Cage's most famous piece of music is called 4 minutes 33 seconds, which the astute will have noticed is 273 seconds. And minus 273 is absolute zero, and that's why he chose the amount of time. And that he got the inspiration for this piece, which involves a pianist going up to a piano and holding their fingers over the keys for 4 minutes and 33 seconds, and then getting up and taking a bow. So the inspiration that came for that piece of music, when he went into an anechoic chamber. I think at MIT, someone took him into this completely silent room, and to his great delight, he realized that even though the room was completely silent, he could hear the inner sound extremely loudly. So he said, this is what you hear when everything is completely silent. So anyway, he wrote this piece called 433, and when he wrote a book about his various sort of ideas and principles and experiences, the book was called Silence, and the opening passage goes something like, if I can remember it correctly, if you let it, it supports itself. You don't have to. Each something is a celebration of the nothing that supports it. When you remove the world from your shoulders, you discover it doesn't drop. Where is the responsibility? If you let it, it supports itself. You don't have to. Each something is a celebration of the nothing that supports it. When you remove the world from your shoulders, you discover it doesn't drop. So we spend a lot of energy carrying the world around, don't we? But the Buddha also gave many teachings on how that when the heart is awake, when there's no clinging, then we're not providing a landing place. When there's no self, there's no place for the sight, sound, smell, taste, touch to land. They're known, they're happening, they're experienced. But there's no being that is sort of catching them and carrying them around and is burdened by them. There's a lovely discourse that I was reminded of today where he says, suppose there was a house with a window in the eastern wall, and when the sun came up in the morning, and the sunlight, a shaft of sunlight came through the window, where would it land? So the monk says, well, on the floor, Venerable Sir. And if there was no floor, where would it land? He said, well, on the water. And if there was no water, where would it land? Well, it wouldn't land. And the Buddha said, so similarly, when consciousness is unsupported, then it doesn't land. There is no place for it to land. Therefore, it remains in that unsupported state, liberated. Another well-known teaching that he gave was a long kind of shaggy dog story in the Digha Nikaya called the Kevada Sutta. It describes this. The Buddha tells a story where a monk was meditating and the pathway to the heavenly realms opened up before him, and it opened up as he formulated the question. This doubt arose in his mind: where is it that earth, water, fire, and wind, the four great elements, fade out and cease without remainder? Where is it that these things actually come to an end, where the world would end and there would be peace, complete tranquility? So the pathway to the gods opens up, and he journeys up to the first level of the earth spirits, the Bhuma Devas, and asks the earth spirits, can you tell me where is it that earth, water, fire, and wind fade out and cease without remainder? And they go, ooh, that's way too deep for us. You better go upstairs and try the heaven of the four great kings. They're in charge of this the earth, and they understand these things. They're really kind of big operators. Go and try them. So goes up to the heaven of the Chatu Maharaja heaven and asks them, and they go, ooh, that's way beyond us. Now you better go up to the Tavatimsa heaven. Lord Saka, he's the king of the Tavatimsa heaven, and he'll certainly know. Maybe his ministers will know, but maybe certainly Saka will understand. He's a disciple of the Buddha, and he understands this profound kind of stuff. So as he goes up to the heaven of the 33 and asks the ministers and the Sakya, oh, sorry, phew, way beyond me, and then up through the Yama Devas and the Tusita Devas and the Nimanarati Devas, the Paranimita Vasavati Devas, and they all can keep referring him upstairs. Sorry, you have to go and talk to the boss. And they go up and up and up until the Brahma reaches the Brahma world, and finally enters the heaven of Mahabrahma, who is Mahabrahma is under the impression that he is the Lord of the universe, the Creator God, and has a rather slightly overinflated view of position in things. But anyway, this monk appears in the Brahma heaven and sees the Brahma's retinue and says, "Can you tell me where is it that earth, water, fire, and wind fade out and cease without remainder?" And they go, "Ooh, that's difficult, but that's just the kind of thing that Mahabrahma is really good at answering. He's a really good, deep, profound philosopher, and so being omniscient and the Lord of the universe, would understand these things. So you should wait, and it might be that Mahabrahma will appear if you're really lucky." So sure enough, in no long time, the sort of radiance manifests, and boom, Mahabrahma appears, and then the monk goes up to Mahabrahma and says, "Venerable Sir, could you tell me where is it that earth, water, fire, and wind fade out and cease without remainder? Where is it that these things come to an end and there is true peace?" And then Mahabrahma replies, "I am Brahma, the great Brahma, the Almighty, Father of all that are and are to be, ordainer and dispenser of law of the universe." Well, right, I understand that, but where is it that earth, water, fire, and wind fade out and cease without remainder? "I am Brahma, the great Brahma, Father of all that are and are to be, ordainer and dispenser," etc., etc. So, of course, they do these 3 times over, as they always do in Buddhist discourses. And then, after the 3rd time that the monk has asked the question, then Brahma kind of takes him by the elbow and leads him off to the side and says, "Monk, you are embarrassing me in front of my retinue. You should not ask me this question. I do not know where is it that earth, water, fire, and wind fade out and cease without remainder. And you have done wrong in being a disciple of the Buddha. You should have gone immediately to your teacher and asked him this question, because I cannot answer it." So he goes to the Buddha, and he beams back down to earth, goes and sees the Buddha, and then asks him this question. And the Buddha says, "Well, actually you asked the question in the wrong way. This is why there was no answer to it, because rather than saying, 'Where is it that earth, water, fire, and wind fade out and cease without remainder?' you should have asked, 'Where is it that earth, water, fire, and wind can find no footing?'" He said, and it is in the consciousness, the vinyanang anidasanang anantang sabato pabang, in the consciousness which is limitless, invisible, unmanifest, and accessible from all sides, radiant in all directions. There it is that earth, water, fire, and wind can find no footing, and long and short and coarse and fine and pure and impure, they can find no footing. There it is, all these things can find no purchase. So this is a very beautiful and rare teaching, and very helpful, because it's pointing to the fact that when there is, and certainly I would guess that during this week, every single one of us, at least for a moment or two, has had that experience of there's awareness, and then there's long and short and coarse and fine and pure and impure, all of the earth, water, fire, and wind, the whole lot is happening, but yet they're not sticking. They are arising, they're doing their thing, they're having their dance, and even kind of intense feelings or kind of painful memories or excited insights. They come, they do their thing, and they don't stick. This is at the Teflon realm. There's nothing sticks. It just appears, it disappears, it doesn't catch. And it's that quality of attention, that quality of awareness that is, everything is known, it all arises, it does its thing, it's in full splendid glory, But it's not being given a place to land. It's not. There's no person being the owner or the holder or even the experiencer of it. It's just this arising and ceasing. So it's not as though one has to remember all of that when we sort of tap into the recollection of that, or remembering the nada sound or recollections of emptiness. But the more that we use the retreat environment to truly know that and to cultivate the faith in that and the knowledge that that quality is accessible to us, that's always here, that it can be drawn upon, then all we need to do is to, in a way, just remind ourselves, remember, it's here, that fundamental basis, that in that purity, that invulnerable quality is here at the very basis of things. And that's not from just a nice idea or trying to convince ourselves of an ephemeral notion, but that this is what these insights into selflessness and anicca, dukkha, anatta bring us to, that direct recognition of that quality. So similarly, the earlier on this week I was talking about becoming, and when we are again when the retreat time is officially over and we're sort of back on the road or walking down the pavement or down the corridor or through our home or wherever it might be, then there's no reason why that shouldn't be. There's no substantial difference between that, the pavement in your hometown, so walking along the street in Macclesfield or Watford or wherever you might be, and the walking path, your favourite walking path between your two oak trees, or mindfully sort of down the corridor here in the retreat centre. There's no reason why we can't treat it in exactly the same way. And so that hopefully during the walking periods and cultivating mindfulness as we've been going about, you've got a bit of a sense of how to walk without going anywhere. There's a perception of the body moving, the still flowing water element, where there's a perception of the body moving, but there's also the recognition of nobody going anywhere. I am not going anywhere. There's the movement, there's the flowing of perceptions, but that fundamental quality of stillness. It's like the cessation of becoming, so that movement happens, and it can happen quite briskly. You can move at speed, and still the heart can be attuned to that fundamental quality of stillness. In the years that, harking back again to my history at Amaravati, ever-present illustrations of these Dhamma talks, when I was living here, I had a lot of responsibilities, one sort or another, and I used to find that my life was sort of shuttling between the office and the vihara and the sala. And the temple didn't exist in those days, and so that I sort of had a triangular world. And so a lot of the time I was, and before we had the cloister with the beautiful walls and the walkways, this was like those of you who will remember, there was a big kind of open space covered in tarmac, with the remains of the lines of the school sort of games courts and fields sort of marked out on the tarmac. So there's big open space in the middle of the monastery, and so then the vihara is over there, and the office is there, and the sala is there, and so and then retreat centre is over here, and so all the time I find I have to be crossing the courtyard. And so we didn't have any intercoms or anything. And so I was forever going from A to B across the courtyard. And then one of the issues that I won't call it a problem, when you are part of the sort of organizing element at Amaravati, is that people always want you for something. So that we used to refer to the courtyard as the shark pool, or the alligator pool, because you had to kind of get through the alligators. So how can you get across the courtyard without being spotted? If you can get from A to B without someone catching you, and after a few years, you begin to really hate the sound of your own name, because As soon as you hear someone saying, Ajahn Amaro, it means another job for me to do. Because I still hadn't learnt the good question response by then. So I could see that there was this sort of urgency in the whole sort of alligator pool mentality, and I could see this was not very Dhammic. So, and I could see there was always this tendency to sort of to be rushing to get onto the next thing. To sort of, I've got to get to the sala, I've got to get to the office, I've got to get to the vihara, I've got to get to the retreat center. And so, not only that, but also trying to avoid being seen. So I made a practice of, whenever I had to cross the courtyard, of walking one step at a time, and really making a conscious effort to not be trying to be riveted on the goal, but just to walk, to feel the body walking, and to not be going anywhere. And as a deliberate effort. And so the result of that was actually things got a lot more peaceful. I still got from A to B. I wasn't like walking in slow motion, but as you might well have realized, it's not a matter of the speed you go. It's entirely in the attitude that you have. And so I began to really quite enjoy that. So rather than it being a sort of an anxiety-provoking experience, to sort of crouch at the door and look and see if there's any sort of the alligators nearby, that I actually was very, very peaceful and quite enjoyed it. And there was one, just remembering one particular instance. There was for a while we were on the circuit, a number of what are known as philosophers of the road, that a collection of guys who actually tend to circulate between Christian monasteries, but who are wanderers, freelance wanderers, philosophers of the road in England. And they started to come by Amaravati for a while, but then the fact we had no supper was really unpopular. So the Christian places are a lot more attractive and interesting. So we really lost points because of the no supper factor. But anyway, I remember distinctly this one fellow who was staying with us for a few weeks, and very interesting, eccentric fella. And so one day I was just crossing the courtyard, as was my wont, and he was a very tall, lanky fellow with a sort of scraggly beard, and slightly. He was a bit, not quite on the surface of the earth. He was very good-hearted, but not entirely meshed with conventional reality. But the remark that he made was really striking to me, because I was just sort of walking across the courtyard in my normal sort of mode of trying not to walk but not go anywhere, and he called out to me, "What are you doing, walking along like you don't exist?" And it wasn't that I was walking slowly. I thought, that's really interesting. What a strange thing for someone to say, but obviously something in him that could recognize that there was a difference in the way that I was walking. I mean, maybe he was on a completely different planet altogether. He was doing something else, but it was really striking that somehow there was a factor that his antennae were picking up that was somehow different. So this is something I would highly recommend when you're getting about your day, going through your house. No matter how urgently you've got to get to that door, you've got to get past that door, you've got to get to the shop, you've got to get to the car, you gotta. This is the essence of becoming. This is like the mind being born into me going somewhere, me got to get something. And just to recognize that feeling of becoming, and then to respond to that just by letting go, by relaxing. Like you can attend to the nada sound if you can hear it, or just relaxing the body, bringing your attention into the body, feeling that sense of becoming, and just letting yourself just walk one step at a time. Just let the body walk or run. but to keep tapping into that quality of stillness, that the unlocated quality of knowing, of awareness, that which is not going anywhere, that to which awareness does not apply. It just is completely spacious and clear and still, even while the body is moving. Or just like you can sit in the car is going at 80 miles an hour, but you're sitting still, right? So in exactly the same way, you can kind of be still in your body as your body is like, gotta get to that meeting. But you're feeling the movement, but you're not moving. Another little way that I like to, getting onto all the handy hints for humans, yeah. One of the other ways that I like to encourage us to do this sort of breaking up the becoming habit is just recognizing that we have thousands of opportunities during the day to just remember this quality, and we tend to develop habits of going on from one thing to the next, and we think, I'm just too busy to meditate. I haven't got no time to practice. The day is so full. I've got the job and the schedule and the kids and my parents. But actually, we have thousands and thousands of opportunities in a day where we can just pause and remember. And to actually, when I was just talking about, not, walking along and noticing that stillness, but even if that's not enough, then you can just stop. So, for example, when you get into, presuming you have a car, say, or even, in other situations, but it's easy to do in a car. When you get into your car, what do you normally do? You got the ignition keys. You get in the car, you put in the keys, you turn the keys, and then the engine starts, and off you go. Well, one of the practices I like to encourage people to do is when you get into your car, you sit down, and then you just wait for 3 seconds before you put the keys in. Just 1, 2, 3. We've probably all got enough time to do that. Like an extra 3 seconds is findable. Right? Now that 3 seconds was a long time, wasn't it? Now that's just enough opportunity to get in your car when you're going somewhere, right? But just to stop, and then in that stopping, the whole of that comes back. Like, where are you going? Who are you? Who am I? Where is where? Oh, right. Remember. And then in that space of non-becoming, then turn the ignition and off we go. So there's thousands of opportunities. Every time we enter a room, we can take that same, we can just pause for a moment. One winter retreat here, Luang Por spent about 3 weeks discoursing on the practice of going through doors, door meditations for 3 weeks. Yeah, I wonder if anyone who's here remembers that. Every Dhamma talk for 3 weeks, it was about how to go through a door. Just the practice of doors. Like, just using that as a way of being mindful, just taking hold of the handle, the feeling of expectation of what's on the other side of the door, not knowing, you're turning the handle, and the moment of revelation as you open the door, the feeling of becoming as you leave one space, you enter another. Luang Por can really kind of extrapolate. 3 weeks on door practices. Going to the loo, bathrooms, marvelous. Privacy is generally guaranteed. They haven't changed that habit in England while I've been away, have they? You're usually on your own in the loo, right? So you can take as much time as you like. Mostly. But at least another 3 or 4 seconds, just going into the loo, and then either before or after you finish using it, just waiting. Like 1, before you go out and meet the world again. 2, 3, 4. Being still, okay. Open the door. Hello, world. We all have that amount of time. So you can be creative with the ways that you do this. With a telephone, it's answering the phone, just letting it ring one more time before you pick it up. Or 3 more times. Just not continually being drawn into, oh, I gotta, immediately. Just minimizing the time, so I don't want to be bothered. I've got to cut down the time it takes me to do everything I have to do. Because it's bad that it takes time to do things. Right? Just, why is it bad? Just to give ourselves just these tiny little fragments of extra time, and we suddenly find that the day has doubled in size. Suddenly there's so much more space in our world. And there's space because of the absence of becoming. Keep recognizing that dimension of our being which is not becoming, that has never been becoming, that is completely free of the realm of time and self and space. And then the last of the reminders I thought I would just mention, and we'll talk a little bit more about is in the next day or two, is simply keeping the precepts. One of the main reasons why being on retreat is so peaceful is because most of us haven't done anything that we need to regret in the last week. Maybe you had an extra cup of Bengal spice, or you took 2 chocolate biscuits. So you might have been feeling guilty about that, but it's not actually immoral to eat 2 chocolate biscuits, unless you stole one from somebody else. So just the power of keeping the precepts and the space that creates where we don't have to remember things that are regrettable. I promote this vigorously in California as a completely novel, well, actually very ancient form of psychotherapy. It's called behavior therapy. It's like not doing stupid things that we then have to remember and regret. It's a very radical form of therapy. Because if you do it, then you have to remember it, and then it's painful. If you don't do it, you don't have to remember it, and it's not painful. Now, I know some people regard this as utterly simplistic. Like, what do you mean? You don't know anything about therapy. But this is a very simple and radical way of approaching things. So, I often fantasize about having a retreat where there's no meditation, but you gather together, you have noble silence, but you all live on the 8 precepts and have no formal practice. And I suspect, my suspicion is that we would probably have an insightful time, and it would be perhaps even as peaceful as if with all the formal meditation practice, just because we're living in a respectful and restrained, calm, gentle, noble way. Just that degree of restraint has an extraordinarily powerful effect in bringing tranquility, supporting insight, supporting mindfulness. Because just taking the precepts encourages a huge degree of attention, of mindfulness to our impulses, our feelings, our attitudes, our attractions, our aversions. And it brings our attention to them. So these are some thoughts I offer for your consideration this evening. Please take whatever is useful, and whatever is not, just leave aside. Anyone? Maybe we could finish again with the Metta Sutta in Pali. Did such a grand job yesterday evening.